right, so I'm so happy. We have lovely Skylar today. Skylar is an amazing healer. She had helped me personally, so I do know she's an amazing healer. She has been helping me, and Skylar is an amazing human being, my friend, and spiritual teacher. She is clairvoyant. And what I really, really, really love about Skylar that everything she talks about always has like this concrete science behind it. So it's never just something that goes along the lines of mystic or something like this, just trust, just believe kind of thing, although that's important too. But it's always comes with some sort of a proof that you cannot help but, yes, this is how it goes. Hi, Skylar.
Hi, so good to be here with you.
So I'd really like for you to go over your talents. Could you please tell people about yourself a little bit?
So spiritual healing wise, I've been doing Course in Miracles for almost 11 years. I had my spiritual awakening when I was 17, so I've been working on my psychic intuitive gifts since then. I've been a master theta healing teacher for 2 years, and I work for the biggest healing organization in Britain called Virgin. I'm also director at 2 companies, so I'm an entrepreneur. And yeah, I think that's the list of my my gifts, as you put them.
Also very, very modest. But yeah, Skylar, by the way, waiting for you, I was actually listening for the first time to one of your, I don't know, what do you call it, lectures, healing sessions with a group of people on that's called time travel.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was very, very interesting because I have very strong views about time. And by the way, when people listen to one of those recordings, can they go, yes, yes, and can that work?
Yeah.
Even if it's a recording? Okay.
Yeah, time and space don't exist, they're illusions. So
Uh-huh.
say yes, they'll go in.
Right, right. So that was my personal question. But Skylar, what I want to start with, because I think a lot of people kind of ask that question. A lot of people wonder what God is,
Oh yeah.
or creator, you can call it universe, system, matrix, whatever it is. Could you please tell us what it is to you?
Well, to me, it's an unconditional, pure loving consciousness that resides within every single thing, and also, is like, I suppose, the essence. It's not really human. It exists through us, but like, that's why I think so many people struggle to understand it. Is we kind of project our own likeness onto God, and we were told we're made in God's likeness, but actually we think God's made in our likeness. I think that's where we kind of get confused. Um, and my experience has been of it as this very powerful white or golden light consciousness, is still small voice within, um, and it's very um, very loving, but very honest. And it's just one of those energies that I think also a lot of people are scared of listening to their guidance. Like, they don't want to know what the truth is. So a lot of people are scared of hearing their divine guidance because then they think they'll have to follow it, or they think it'll ask them to do things they don't want to do. And when you really enter into relationship with Creator, that's not what happens at all, because it is part of you and it is with you. You just become more of who you really are. But I think that's a big block for a lot of people, is they're just scared. If I entered a relationship with God, is it going to dominate me? Is it going to control me? Is it just like another, entity or fearful figure that I'm dealing with here? Is it just another illusion that was created? And that's why I think personal experience of God and personal relationship with God is so important, because no one can give you that. You have to discover it for yourself. They can show you how their connection is, but your personal connection is the most important thing.
So my, I just recently, I shared that with you, but I'm going to share that with the audience as well. Recently, kind of, it's one thing to consciously understand something, but it is a completely different thing to feel it with every fiber of your being. And I recently went through that experience. Obviously, there was years of, you know, studying science and years of listening to people like you. And then the events that happened right before that happened was my interview with Steel Swan, where I asked her a similar question and she gave this beautiful analogy. She said, imagine, well, I asked her actually, I said, well, if we all one, how come there is a fragmentation, right? And so she gave this beautiful analogy. She said, imagine that everything is this one beautiful glass and you hit it and it fractured in infinite amount of little teeny bits of things, right? So it is all one and yet it's all fractionized. And so we went on with that conversation. And then what happened was I was listening to you, the Course of Miracles, right? That the lecture or teaching or healing that you did. And it's available. It's on the internet, on YouTube. And then I was like, well, what is that Course of Miracle? And coming from non-religious background completely, I didn't even know about that book at all, but you were referencing that all the time. So it is also available completely free on YouTube. So I started listening to it, and I wasn't really all like paying attention. I just gave myself kind of like almost an order. I said, okay, so whatever information that I will hear will be important to me to hear. If I miss something, then, well, I guess it's not important. And so I was,
Course in Miracles has actually got a seriously beautiful answer to that question as well. So it literally says that we're sunbeams thinking we're separate from the sun. We're waves thinking we're separate from the ocean.
right.
And the way that I see it is that, like, for example, your skin and my skin, it's made up of hundreds of little cells. But when you look at the skin, it looks like it's one.
Right.
Right? When you look at a liver, it's hundreds of little liver cells, but it looks like it's one organ functioning as a whole.
Right.
So it's not so much that the oneness is the illusion, it's that the separation is the illusion. It's just that for everything to function as a whole, all of us have to be given individual jobs. Like Course in Miracles says, it's a very personal curriculum, you know, that each of us has been given by Creator that's for our highest and best evolution, and it's unique to each one of us. I think it's the same thing to the cells in the body. All the cells in the body get born blank. I think that's amazing. You know, they all are born genetically blank, and then they kind of choose what they're going to be, whether they're going to be a liver cell or a heart cell or a blood cell. But they're all born blank. And I think it's similar to us. You know, we choose whether we're going to work as spiritual healers or financial healers or, you know, medical healers, but we're all choosing how to contribute to the collective consciousness of the planet and of humanity, you
Right.
know. And it's Marianne Williamson that says, you know, it's when somebody says, no, I don't want to work for the higher functioning of the body or the higher function of humanity. It's the same thing as a cell going, I don't want to work towards the higher functioning of the body. I want to do my own thing, right? And we call that cancer. That's what she says. And I think in humanity, that's what's happened. We're like, I don't want to work for the higher functioning of the whole. I just want to do what I want to do, whether it destroys people or the environment or not. And that's what's created this separation. It's that there is no breakdown between self-actualization and collaboration. They're just parts of the same process. Like you go through awakening and then you self-realize. And when you realize who you really are and that who you really are is love, you then find other people who make part of your inner circle who are on the same mission.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the same way that when a liver cell realizes, hey, I'm here to serve the body and I'm here to help with the detoxing processes and with the rejuvenation, and I'm the fire of the digestive system, I'm the one that's going to help basically the alchemy from light in plants to, you know, energy inside the body. It's like, well, there are other liver cells that have already made that decision,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then you kind of find your tribe, or you find your family, because we're not supposed to be doing this alone, right? but it feels that way.
Right.
But we're not. Every cell is still separate. It just looks like skin.
Right. So, can we talk about the importance of ego? Because a lot of the times it gets demonized. People think that they have to completely detach themselves from ego, and they keep self-criticizing. And in fact, what they do with that, they further fractionate themselves as opposed to integrating themselves into one.
Well, the thing about the ego is that it was really created for contrast. You can't really experience love unless you experience fear. And most people think you can transcend the ego by fearing it, which is, a juxtaposition. You can't transcend fear by fearing it. You can't fight fire with fire. It's not effective at all. The only way to, really transcend your own darkness is by developing the virtues, the spiritual muscles required to become who you really are. And it's this is why I love the Course in Miracles, because it's literally 365 days of meditations, and the first 6 months is about breaking down the thought system based on fear, and the next 6 months about rebuilding your mind in a loving way. But it's drip by drip. You have to do the exercise once in the morning and then little times during the day every day. So it's not awakening you by force. It's awakening you the way a flower opens under the sun. It's like the natural process. It gives you a little bit at a time in a way that you can absorb it in a healthy way. And in your time, when you are ready, you open to that connection with Creator. As opposed to most people trying to force it on you, which is already a vibration of fear, right? A vibration of ego. But you need a personality. You need to understand yourself as a separate being to have a human experience. And you also need to understand the darkness in order to go fully into the light. And when you're a spiritual baby, basically, you underestimate the light, but you also underestimate the darkness. You underestimate the extent of your power to make difference in the world. And you also underestimate the level of evil that is currently, there with things like torture and greed and deception, pure lies and corruption. So in the beginning, people either polarize, they either go straight into everything is unicorns and rainbows and bunny rabbits, or everything is terrible and conspiracy and nothing is true and humanity is a curse on the planet. And this polarization is them deciding what they're going to start with first. And the Course in Miracles it literally says you can choose when to take different parts of the curriculum, but the curriculum is not up to you, right? So we can choose when we study something or when we master the laws and the virtues of the universe, but we can't change what those virtues are. You can't change unconditional love, ultimate truth, infinite patience. A Course in Miracles says infinite patience brings immediate results. And when you have that polarization around fear, you have, like you said, this crazy, I need to get rid of my ego so I don't become like the bad people on the planet, or I never had an ego in the first place because I'm one with God and I'm going to spiritually bypass everything, that I'm actually doing to everyone else. And that's where, like you're saying, like people really go into a panic around the ego. It's designed to literally allow you to experience contrast, but also to show you the truth of what actual power is. Most of us, there's a really good book, I've forgotten the name of the author, but there's a really good book called Power versus Force. That literally explains to you that our real power, both biologically, emotionally, and spiritually, doesn't come from forces. It doesn't come from emotional, mental, or physical violence. And it shows you all the scientific proof for that. Whereas we're taught from the word go that all of our power comes from emotional, mental, or spiritual violence. It doesn't matter if you quote that violence in pink paint and call it spirituality. It's still violence if you're trying to force someone to believe something and you don't respect their free will. So I think that's what happens a lot. It's like, oh, you have to get rid of your ego. You have to sacrifice this. You have to sacrifice that. It's like, no, you have to constantly keep growing. You have to develop and strengthen your virtues the way you have to go to the gym and work your physical body. If you want to stay strong and conscious, then, with the gym, you work with the law of motion, you work the body. With meditation, you work with the law of stillness. You still the mind, you still the body. So you have time to respond, because the ego speaks first and loudest. Our fear comes first, because to survive in a physical planet, you didn't have time to think about the tiger attacking. You just had to run. It's like, if you had time to think about it, you were dead. So the ego is like also a biological animal instinct of there are hunters and there are prey, and you have to figure out which one you are in a split second. And people keep saying psychologically, which makes me laugh, but it's really a big deal. They keep saying, especially in psychological circles, that's not happening anymore. You don't have anything to fear anymore. It's just a response that's outdated. And I'm sitting there going, 80% of murders committed in the whole of the world are committed by people's husbands or wives, right? Most of the war and death and stuff that we see comes from other humans. And it normally comes after some kind of negative argument or discussion. So for your ego to literally try and protect you in situations of stress is not an outdated modality at all. You know, it's still very much, the danger has changed, but you can't fool your physical body or your animal instinct. It's still danger. And it can still cost you your life to get in the car with the wrong person, you know, to make a business deal with the wrong person, to, you know, make love with the wrong person. So your instincts and your ego are not outdated. They're very much bang on the money. Our lives are still at risk on a daily basis. It's just that I think collectively we're being numbed down. Our animal instinct is being like told there's no danger, you're crazy. But actually all animals are born with teeth and claws for a reason. And we're born with that natural instinct to fight and defend ourselves for a reason. So it's not about getting rid of the ego. It's about developing very strong emotional and spiritual muscles so that you then have more powerful things to use than your ego.
Right. Well, yeah, it's interesting because, in fact, if you want to achieve that integration, first and foremost, you have to accept all these sides they might not like about your ego. You might not like about yourself. You have to accept it, unconditionally love it. And then you're, well, it's a process, right? And so what I think is, and that was my realization, because I always knew, just culturally, I always knew that everything is one. We're all part of one thing, right? Maybe not to the extent that I'm understanding of it now, but I always kind of knew it, right? And that the world is dual. It's also kind of wisdom that comes culturally from my nation. But what's interesting, the realization of God, creator, universe, the oneness of all, was that it is, like you said, a beautiful infinite consciousness that lives different experiences through everything and everyone. Yeah. With one single purpose, I guess, as far as I know, is to learn through different perspectives. So therefore, we are all aspects of God.
Yeah, like this is why I love the body so much. Like, it's exactly what you're saying. Like, if you were to ask every cell in the body, it's exactly what we're saying. We're a consciousness experiencing ourselves through a physical body so we can learn as much as possible.
Right.
You know, and God is a consciousness experiencing itself through the multiverse so that it can learn as much as possible.
So yeah, that perspective is very important. Oh gosh, what was I going to say? So so going back to shadow work, because we kind of talked about the integration that's often achieved by shadow work, right? So could you let me know, how do you do it? Because I have my own ways to do it.
I'm very methodical. So for me, I think that, you know, I start with basically I'd start with looking at the 7 deadly sins. You know, start looking at anger, jealousy, greed, gluttony, because the word sin actually means mistaken thought. Actually comes from an archery term, which means to miss the mark. So it means you aimed and you missed the target, right? So historically speaking, before psychology was even invented, they knew that if you made these mistakes in thinking and you regularly indulged, you know, in anger, greed, or gluttony, etc., that this would lead to death. They're called 7 deadly sins, right? They're not called 7 sins for fun. They're pretty much in most of the different religions. You know, they're listed really accurately, and they each correspond to different chakras as well. So you're basically looking at, Yeah, so basically you're looking at being radically honest with yourself, because we live in a culture that's very much spiritually bypassing.
Mhm.
So it's like we just said, they're basically going on my, I don't have any flaws. Everyone's perfect just the way they are because we're an aspect of God. And it's like, yes, that's the ultimate truth. But when we split off, or when we experience ourselves, when we choose to experience free will, as an ultimate truth, then we literally create a space where it's possible to do mistakes in thinking. They're not anything terrible. It's like having a nightmare, but you still don't want to be having nightmares every night, right? They're not pleasant things to have, no matter what way you coach them or how insignificant. Anyone who's ever had a nightmare will tell you it's hard. It's hardcore to have one. I wouldn't wish it nightmares on anyone. And as you start to realize, okay, these are the thoughts that are creating this nightmare, and they always come back. Like the only ones I think that they haven't written down is like a core belief in being broken. Like
Mhm.
so many people believe they're broken, and then everything they create is broken. The family is broken, their body's broken, and they have like a core belief that everything is damaged. But you really have to like have a radical look at where it is that you're going wrong. And I love, have you heard of the Jewish one, the Yom Kippur that they do at Christmas? So the Jews have a wonderful practice called Yom Kippur, and
Oh, and
basically,
of the holiday for sure.
yeah,
I
and
don't
it's basically a review. They write down every mistake in thinking they've done over the year.
thinking.
Yeah, everything that they've done wrong, everything that they've thought wrong, they literally fast for that day and they write together their mistakes and they hand them over to Creator.
Wow,
So that
it's healing.
it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've been doing it for a long time. But that for me is how in my brain, that's how it works. Because if I'm not methodical, then I can, like, especially when you're dealing with the ego, because it's like the ego's silver tongued and it's very convincing. I have a lovely hairdresser, but she was trying to convince me that in a relationship, when something goes wrong, it's never your fault. And through all of my life, I was like, there's a very big difference between fault and responsibility, right?
Huge.
If something goes wrong in the relationship, it may not be your fault, but it damn sure is your responsibility, you know? And it's that paradigm that leads to victim consciousness. When you start thinking, I have no part in creating an experience, you're abdicating your power and you're abdicating your responsibility. And it happens in an instant, right? Somebody's in pain, whether they're expressing with anger or neglect or however it is that they're showing it, and we go straight into there's nothing I can do, they're just a crazy person, instead of going into, okay, Creator, show me what I'm not bringing to this space that's allowing this to occur here. Show me what's really happening deep down. And the answers that you get, this is the shadow work. Show me the truth of what's going on, instead of the superficial, what I would like to be going on or what I'm going to tell my friends happened later. And very often, like, I'll give you a really good example from my life. So I got really ill, I think a year after me and my partner got together. I think it was 2 years actually. And I had a bad miscarriage. And after that miscarriage, I went into really deep depression for at least 2 or 3 months. And it got to the point where we were having arguments 2 or 3 times every day. And my ego was going into the whole victim story. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm trying to recover from a very difficult experience. They should be more understanding. This should have happened and that should have happened. And when I went up on top of the boat to do my Course in Miracles and to meditate, the answer was really clear. It's like, yes, this happened, but your response was to completely shut down. Your response has been to stop giving love altogether. You are completely self-absorbed. You are depressed all the time. You're not giving any love. You're not giving any joy. And he's missing you. And he's scared he's losing you. Right? So that was really hard for me to hear. And that's why I say, if you're doing the Course in Miracles properly, you're going to want to throw it at something at least once, you know?
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to hear that my sadness was self-absorbed. I didn't want to hear that my grief was selfish. But that's the truth. On some level, when you shut off, I wasn't the only one that lost a kid. He did too. I wasn't the only one that went through a hard time. His wife got sick. He was left all alone. But from my ego's perspective, it was only happening to me. Nobody could possibly understand what I was going through. And it's very hard when you get into that no one understands me state to get help, because you attract people that are useless at helping you because you're in that belief, no one can help me. And when you do get people that can help you, feel insulted when they tell you the truth because it hurts, you know?
I'm
But that's the shadow work. It's like looking at really vulnerable things and going, I'm going to see this honestly, and then I'm going to make the changes required to stay in alignment to love.
right. Well, I was smiling because, well, I had a similar situation for the for one thing, so I know exactly what you went through. But on the other hand, I was smiling because that is an exact example of a shadow work. Because without that shadow, you will never see that light. And it's very interesting concept. So, well, not you. So everyone has a different way of approaching shadow work, and mine's more like, because I was listening to Teal Swan for a long time, and I was reading Carl Jung since I was a teenager and stuff. Um, so the way that I've been doing it is that as soon as I detect a certain emotion that I'm calling negative or something, or emotional cocktail, not necessarily, like I don't even really try to define what emotions are in that cocktail. What I'd do is I would sit with it. I would actually let it flow, and I'd say, come, I'm here, I'm listening, my entire attention is with you. And what happens is that instead of like bottling it up, what happens, that cocktail, emotional cocktail, or just one emotion, whatever happens, is like flows right through me and frees me from it, interestingly. And then what I do, because it has its own like taste pattern, whatever you call it, like you can detect it. I go down in the history of my own life and try to see when I experienced that once. Oftentimes I go through several of those experiences, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, that was something that happened to me when I was this little or something. And then it kind of became a recurring thing, mostly because I never really paid attention to it. And so then I try to work with that, baby or like, teenager or something, my younger self, basically.
Yeah, I think like this is like, so shadow work can get very advanced, and it comes like, it's like the truth. It's spoken in many different languages with a capital T.
Mm-hmm.
The most important thing is the intention to be radically honest. It's like to find the ultimate truth of the situation.
100%.
And then go through to inner child work, or past life work, or soul, or genetic. It doesn't matter. The intention is pure. You will find a resolution. And it's exactly what you're saying. The watching, the being with, the witnessing of the pain breaks the separation.
Right.
People don't think it's so simple, presence, but the power of it is to destroy separation. The moment you destroy separation, pain starts to dissolve, the way the sun dissolves the snow.
Right.
So you can keep it really, really simple. In fact, sometimes I think that's easier. When I first woke up spiritually, I'll long story short, I started having these nightmares that I now know were like past life experiences. And it was the same nightmare over and over again. But it was literally I was out gathering herbs. It was somewhere in France, because I remember I was speaking French fluently in the dream. And I don't speak French that well. And I was out like when your hands are full of herbs, literally, and I had baskets and my arms were aching and I was carrying them home. And when I was almost home, I literally heard like sounds of soldiers, and I dropped the baskets and climbed up the tree. And I literally saw them bolting the doors of the house closed and setting the house on fire with my whole family inside.
Wow.
And I sat up in this tree the whole night. And I remember my fingernails were like literally came off because of how hard I was holding on. So I wouldn't make a sound, so they wouldn't hear me scream. And so when I heard my family dying, I wouldn't freak out. And so they wouldn't find me, right? Because if they found me, I'd be dead too. And I remember like how angry I was, because they were obviously herbalists. I was out there gathering herbs. And since then, I've actually only started being able to work with herbs last year. Until then, I know what they do and I'm very good with them, but I just avoid them. Even plants, I never buy plants. It's really strange, right? but the grief attached to it was so great. You know, I somehow subconsciously blamed the plants for the death of my family, right? But I had that dream 7, 8, 9, 12 times a night, and it would replay like on repeat, on repeat, on repeat. Because when you ask the universe for help, and I was physically ill and I didn't believe in a God, but I was saying to the universe, if there's anything out there that can help me, I need you, because my parents can't help me with this. The doctors can't help me with this. I don't want to die. And I need help. You know, whatever's out there, I need help. And the universe takes this giant magnifying glass and shows it where you're blocking love from entering. Right? And the reason I was blocking the love of Creator, the biggest one, was the death of that family in that lifetime. So it was coming up over and over and over again. And literally I was awake till the early hours of the morning, because I could not face going back to sleep and having this dream again. It was just too, like, this soul PTSD was just too painful. And by the way, yes, PTSD does go into other lifetimes. Okay, it does not just count for lifetime, just so you know. But for me, like when I woke up, because literally with my ex-boyfriend's father was a healer, and when I couldn't sleep and he saw that I was physically ill, he offered me a Reiki healing, and I literally popped open like a firework. But I started seeing things and hearing things and having a really strong connection with my angels, that they stayed with me until I was ready to develop a connection with Creator. But very much like you're saying, you know, this understanding that I was blocking the love. It's not that the love was ever absent. It's not the love was ever gone. The miracle was always there. But the shadow work is the universe showing you where you're subconsciously or on a soul level or on an ancestral level blocking God's love from entering. And God will not violate your free will. Right? So shadow work isn't something we have to do to get closer to God so much as something we have to do to just experience the closest that's already in existence.
Beautiful.
You know, but it's very much like we do things happen and we're like, love isn't safe, and the moment we do that, or we forget that other humans are divine. You know, people often complain to me about humanity, and I'm like, look, you know, if you can't tell me that you love Creator and hate humanity this much. You know, there's something going on there. And it's things like that. It's like, you can't love God and be like, but I don't like the Jews. No, I don't like the animals. No, I don't like humanity. No, I don't like this alien race. It's like, God is everything. You know, when you block love in any way, you block your connection to Creator in some way. So it's what you're saying, you know, shadow work is 100% necessary, but it's also not brain candy. You know, it's not an excuse to abuse other people. It's not an excuse for being a victim. It's not a justification for bad behavior. You know, and it's also we're not here to spiritually police the universe. We're not here to spiritually analyze other people, which becomes more and more tempting with the more psychic and spiritual knowledge that you have. Is to, when you're able to see it's someone's childhood trauma, it's so tempting to tell them.
Right.
You know, when you're able to see someone's flaws clearly, it's so tempting to want to fix them. But then you move into a space of thinking they're broken, and the healing will be blocked anyway. You know, it takes a lot of spiritual discipline to realize that we're here to really work with the people who are ready. And as their consciousness raises, other people will awaken the way a flower awakens in its right time.
Right. I mean,
there's no point spending hours trying to violate someone's free will, you know, because you want to make a spiritual point. It just won't work.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a friend like you who can download programs, remove stuff, very great, amazing shortcuts. But in reality, majority of work you have to do yourself. You have to commit to that. And I don't know, I find it fascinating.
And I think that's why this is why I still work with my teacher all the time. It's why I still get healings for me all the time. You know, you wouldn't do your hair without looking in a mirror.
Right. Exactly. Great analogy.
You need to reflect sometimes to see what's really going on. People always think it's funny, right? Because if I face any major decision in my life, I end up in the bathroom. Like, all of my biggest life choices have been made standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom.
You're funny.
I'm like, why? You know, why do you go into the bathroom? And I'm like, because I can look myself in the eyes. There's a mirror, you know, and there's privacy. And I can feel whether or not that works with me. You know, Whereas when there's other people, or I can't look at myself, I can't really tell what's going on in my core. You know, it's exactly what you're saying. It's like, it's not an easy journey, especially when you're teaching. Like for me, when I'm teaching, especially when I have a lot of students in the room, their stuff brings up my stuff, you know, and I have to be so conscious to like put it on the hanger and sort it out after class, or, you know, book my own healing session at the end of the week so that I can clear my own stuff, because their job is to literally awaken me. And as they grow, I grow more with them. You know, your students become your teachers. They're brilliant. They're phenomenal ascended masters. But sometimes when you spent the whole day, like you said, doing this powerful shadow work, in Theta we call it digging work. You know, we literally call it digging, but it's shadow work by another name. You know, it's hardcore. It's really hardcore. You know, dealing with one thing after the other, and even realizing, oh my God, you know, this is exactly my issue.
Right? No.
Refusing to see it Creator's way for years, like refusing, like point blank, stubbornly refusing. And then in comes this client, and I literally see exactly what I've been doing and exactly how to solve this problem. And what a miracle is that? You know, what miracle is that? But it's so hard, because it's exactly what you're saying. Like sometimes when you ask for a miracle or you ask for a healing, the universe shows you because you're aware enough. But sometimes it places you right next to the person that is the best for your healing. And that could be the client, that could be the teacher, you know, because we project both our light and our darkness as part of shadow work. And I remember when I met my teacher, her name's Anna Kitney. She's literally one of the best theta healers in the world.
Yeah, I've listened to her.
Yeah, I remember the day I met her, and she pulled me up on stage and she removed my self-hatred in 15 minutes. Something that had been drowning me for 20 years, she got rid of in 15 minutes in front of a room full of people, as if it was nothing, like it was taking candy from a baby. And my whole energy field went into fear. I was terrified of her. You know, I was absolutely terrified. And I remember thinking, what is going on with me? Like, I remember sitting after I left and going, this is like, I was happy at the same time I was terrified. I was like, what is going on? And I could hear my angel so loudly going, you're projecting your light. You know, this is your teacher. You're projecting your light. And I was like, right. And exactly what do I do about that? Because it's really scary. And I could hear the message so strongly. It's like, you can choose. You choose between being jealous and being angry and being afraid, or you choose courage and you choose gratitude, and you choose to nurture the light that you see within her, you know?
And embrace it. Yeah.
And it's exactly what you're saying. Like sometimes even the people that are good for us trigger the ego, because it's like, if I go here, then, you know, life will never be the same again.
Yeah.
You know, that's what happens in intimate relationships too. And it's like, oh my God, what the hell's going on?
Oh, intimate relationships, a lot more, because you literally mirror, like you see that, like the reflection of you right then and there all the time. And I think that's a relationship with your family too. Oftentimes when, you know, when you see something and, you know, you have this unwanted reaction towards someone you're supposed to love, it's a reflection of what's going on with you.
Yeah.
But what I think is very interesting is that if you do not actually address the issue, what happens that fractionation, and I'm not even sure if I'm saying it correctly, my third language, that separation, that fractionation is becoming more and more deep, because whatever the issue is that you're not working on is going to come back again and again and again in bigger and bigger and bigger form. So you pay attention.
Yeah. And so that you don't miss the opportunity. Like, we choose our problems because we need their gifts. And whenever you reject the healing, like whenever you see the problem as a problem instead of as an opportunity or a challenge, you literally reject your own power. And the universe is an opportunity machine. The fact that you've missed the lesson once doesn't mean you're not going to get another opportunity to go to the next level of power or responsibility or love, you know? And God knocks over and over again. The universe doesn't ask once, it keeps knocking. And also the pain keeps increasing. Like when you don't deal with it, it's much easier to deal with a problem when it's small. Over
Yeah.
time, you know, it becomes more entrenched and you start to identify with it. So the
Right.
quicker you progress with it, the gentler the universe is. But over time, it's like a tree. You really have to do a lot to remove a tree. But if you remove like a tiny little sapling, it's not an issue. Right? It's like, but if you let it become a tree over 10, 20, 30 years, then you've got like 6 meters of trouble on your hands that you have to like pull out by the roots. And I see that a
Trees. I love them so much. I have like a super soft spot for plants, trees. I have plants here and I talk to them. I don't know. It's
I
silly.
talk to them all the time. I miss them. I love trees. I love trees, but I can't do, and I'm much better with herbs now, but I can't do indoor plants. I can do gardens. But yeah, but we do live in a basement, so that's
Mm.
fair enough, right?
Well, my girls and boys over here, they're like, I don't know, the happy little ones. I also have hummingbirds that come. I had to close the balcony so they don't fly in.
Any pictures?
I will send you some, yes. So, what do you think? And we'll get back to the whole point of time because I mentioned what I was listening right before you and I went was this interview for a reason because I want to go back to the whole time thing, the concept. But since we are on the subject of ego and learning the universal consciousness, God, learning through all of our experiences, all of our perspectives, gaining this infinite knowledge. So when we're born, why do we not remember? And then the second thing is how do we remember? How do we remember what is our true purposes? Why are we here? Why did we decide to be born?
So I think the reason, and this is my perspective, okay? There is nobody that really knows the answer to this. This is my genuine understanding. Um, I believe it's because we're blessed with innocence when we're born.
Mhm.
You know, innocence is like a very high form of divine protection, and we actually forget. But it's like when you see children just doing things for the joy of it. You know, it's complete innocence, and you get a chance at a fresh start. You know, you really do, and you're born without remembering your past lives. Some of us are, but you're not born without choosing your parents or choosing your family or choosing your lessons. So your fate and your destiny, you chose very carefully before you incarnated. So you don't remember a lot of people don't remember their past lives. But when you start to grow, it becomes obvious through what your gifts are, whether that's science or music or, you know, psychic gifts and abilities, what I suppose is your natural awakening or what your calling is. That they say that like the unconditional love is always calling, like God is always calling and the call's always going out, and we choose when we answer or if we answer. But those gifts, I think the reason most people are struggle so much with what their purpose is that they're it's like we said, projecting the light. They've been so trained to not follow their heart, to not follow their gifts, and to do what they're told, that they forgot that they had original gifts in the first place. You
Mhm.
know, but everyone is born. I've worked with children for almost both since I was 14 and I'm now 30, so almost 24 years. And I've never met a child that doesn't have gifts. I've never met an adult that doesn't have gifts. When I scan them energetically, you can see their gifts,
Mhm.
you know, and they know what their gifts are. But then they have the beliefs wrapped around them. Oh, this is just a hobby. Oh, I can never make money out of this. Oh, you know, I'm not supposed to use this. You know, you pointed out to me very beautifully in a conversation we had earlier that I was taught not to use my beauty. I was taught not to use, you know, I was taught to be very humble. I was taught not to use my, you know, my confidence. You know, everybody has gifts that they're taught by their parents or by society. It's not okay to use, right?
But
Uh,
we'll work with your camera angle as a filmmaker. Look, you're all gorgeous, and you should use that.
it's like I remember my teacher saying a very similar thing to me because I'd never marketed myself. My website didn't even have any pictures of me. And she literally said to me, you know, you're a beautiful girl. And I was like, yes. And she was like, so let's use that. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, we're going to do some photo shoots, we're going to do this. And I was like, okay, because I was really raised in a family where the academics mattered,
Right, same thing.
you know, but the looks was like something you actually had to avoid being corrupted by. It was like, don't rely on it. Don't, do you see what I'm saying? Don't use that power. It's superficial, doesn't last. That's what I was taught, you know. So there's these, but like I remember there's a really good class in Theta called World Relations, and you literally spend a week working on your prejudices towards other cultures. So, you know, Judaism, Muslim, Buddhist, Christianity. Often your biggest prejudice is towards your own faith, which I find amazing. But you also work on, and I didn't know this was in the class, but you work on the beauty industry. You work on like, you know, the media. And for me, when it came to doing the digging work or the shadow work on the beauty industry, oh my God, like I could not stop crying because the consciousness of women being chopped open or having their breasts changed or their like literally being cut open for the beauty, like the beauty being their only worth was so powerful. I didn't
Right.
even realize it was there. It's not what I would have chosen to dig on. But when I asked Creator, I was like, what should I work on? He was like, work on this. And I was like, no, I want to work on that. And he's like, work on this. And you know, it's exactly what you're saying. It's shadow work is a powerful thing. And when we're talking about, you know, the transcending the ego and really moving deeply into who we are, there are parts of ourselves we don't see. And that's why you need the mirror. You know, that's why you need someone to help you. And I really believe that. You know, I even have my girlfriends help me when I get ready to go for a night out. I get them to check the back of my hair. I get them to check the back of my dress. And it's the same thing with energy. There's some things that are, even when you can see, they need to be witnessed to be healed. You know, you need someone else to be in their presence and be able to see it differently than the way you see it. For me, inner child healing was very like that. Like I could work with my inner child, but I didn't know how to love her.
Mm-hmm.
I could tolerate her, but I couldn't love her.
Poor baby.
You know, so for me, it was other people who were very good at working with their children that showed me how to love her instead of just tolerate her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I moved from tolerance to actual love, but that was a journey.
Right.
Right. And a lot of people say to me, oh no, unconditional love is like inner child work doesn't work. I'm like, no, it really does. It's just you have to love the child. And if
Right.
you, that's a problem. It's like when people say self-healing doesn't work. I'm like, it really does work. But people struggle to go into their own body with love. They struggle to see themselves with love. You know, so when you go to a healer, they automatically normally see you with love, and it's much easier for them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but with you, especially if you're angry at yourself or you're judgmental of yourself or you're very critical, you go in and you're like, oh, this is the problem and that's the problem and I should be more like this and this should be more like that, and why am I even having to do this healing anyway? I've done so much healing already, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of that energy is judgment. It's not love. That's not powerful enough to heal anything. In the Course in Miracles, it would say that it's judgment masquerading as love. It's judgment masquerading as concern. You know, but really it's just criticism and judgment. It's not powerful enough to literally create a miracle in the physical body or in the mental body or in consciousness itself. You know, but most of us aren't honest enough to say that we don't love ourselves enough to get the healing. We go, no, I do love myself. We spiritually bypass the spaces where we haven't learned to do that yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there are times where you can go backwards and times where you can go forwards. Like this is what you were saying with time, and this is, I think time is such an interesting thing, because like when I do healings with people, I realize that I do healings on their whole life. I work on their inner child, I work on their past lives, and I'm like, oh my God, this person literally from a spiritual perspective has known me for thousands of years. Their ancestors already knew me before this healing actually happened, because I'm sending healing backwards in time. You know, and that we agreed as part of our divine timing to meet in this space, and that is insanely beautiful.
It is, and especially given the fact that it's all happening right now. You know, at the same time, it's just in different dimension somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like ego is not just an individual concept; it's a collective consciousness. So the ego is the fear mind. So it's been around before we were born. It'll be around after we die.
Right.
You know, so there's a collective ego, just like there's a collective Holy Spirit or divine awareness. you know? So your ego wasn't just created by you in this life or just for you to experience this body. You've had it many lifetimes. And your ancestors have their own stuff to add as well, you know, for your protection, for your growth, and for your healing. So it's a very, it's your unique curriculum, you know, to achieve enlightenment. And it's a gift, it's not a curse.
Right. So I'm just brainstorming here. So maybe we're born without the memory. It's just like, I don't know, you might laugh at me, but maybe we're born in that kind of circumstance because it is, in fact, the other side of where we're supposed to be. It's a fractionation on its own, it's the shadow as well, because you go from being innocent and no memory to be hopefully mature. Not everyone matures, but hopefully being mature and gain knowledge and hopefully enlightened as well. I don't know. It's just a thought.
No, it's a very good thought. It's exactly that. You're born into innocence, not into ignorance. Okay.
Good correction. Yes.
You're born into innocence, and as time grows, you're given more responsibility. You're not given more burden, but you are given more responsibility. And through the, when you go to school, you get the lesson first, and then you get the what's it called, the problem after. But in life, you get the problem first and then the lesson after.
Right.
Right. And it's because the universe knows what it's doing. You remember it and you know that it's important once you've had the experience of its absence or of its lack. Right.
Makes sense.
When we're taught in school that it's in reverse, we're kind of expecting the universe to be like a school, and it's not. You know, the school system was based on the universe, but on a much easier version for children, right? But the truth is humans face problems. Our ancestors faced massive problems, from housing to heating to hunting to, you know, without having the solutions, and they had to create solutions to those problems. Right? We just make it easier for children because in their innocence, we try and support them as much as possible. The issue is that then once they transition into the actual laws of life, they struggle because they're not become strong in problem solving. You know, they've become strong in copying other people instead of solving their own problems. And every problem is unique. Every soul is unique, right? But as they transition to that knowledge, and they're like, this is exactly what you're saying. Knowledge is powerful, but it's the same as we're born into innocence, not ignorance. We mature into wisdom and not knowledge, right? So when you're young, you go, and most people go in from ignorance into knowledge, and they don't know how to apply what they know. And that's where most people are stuck. It's like love is infinitely practical, but unless you have someone to model, how do you practically apply the principles that we're discussing? Right. You know, what does love actually mean to you? And that in Theta, we talk about distortions of love, which is a shadow work, because love might mean different things to me and you. To me, love might mean, you know, support. To you or to your partner, it might mean control, you know, because that's what they grew up with. That's what their frequency is, which means when I, you know, don't give them, when I'm not controlling, when I'm not demanding, you know, they might think I'm not interested in them. They might think that it's very interesting, twisted distortion. So you can see it with fetishes because they're distortions of sexuality. Someone gets turned on by a shoe. You know, the shoe means sex, and you're sitting there going, well, that's fun, you know, but it's a distortion because you can't really have sex with a shoe. So it's distortions are interesting, part of shadow work, but it's just like mirrors. Not all mirrors are the same. You know, some elongate things, some shorten things, some slim things down, some make you bigger. And it's the same thing with, you know, mirrors and shadow work, is that some things are distorted. The way that we see things is distorted by our own beliefs and desires of what we would rather was there than what actually is there. Because it's exactly what you're saying. This movement from ignorance into knowledge is not just a gift, it's a responsibility.
It's actually you saying, not me. I wish I said that.
It's responsibility. It's like, I think most of us are scared of the level of responsibility that we're given, you know, and we try and backpedal. because we don't think we're worthy. We don't think we're capable of handling it. We think we're going to screw it up. And the truth is we're going to. You know, the issue is that we have to create children and people that are brave enough to fail, you know, and go through that, and to actually grow through their failures, instead of, you know, giving up when the going gets tough. They really go into that diamond space. Like I always say, my job is to turn baby healers into, you know, masters, and they come in as sand and they leave as diamonds, and that's the job. You know, your job is to apply the right pressure you know, and to create the right heat, you know, the right amount of love and the right environment where they get to practice, so they come out as beings that are much stronger and much more powerful than you are. You know, your job is to kind of let them stand on your shoulders with all that wisdom and knowledge and take humanity further.
Right.
But it's like that when we're born without any knowledge or all the knowledge of what we were before, it's the innocence that allows us to be who we are now. You know, humans get stuck in the past anyway. You know, you talk to any old person, all they're going to tell you is about their younger time.
Yeah, and how bad the new generations are. And I was thinking, as you were talking about the children, I was thinking, I actually have a completely different belief, and you're already familiar with that, because I'm proud if I see that my children are better than me, right? They
Yep.
have knowledge, and you know, and stuff. But it's the same goes for younger generations for me. You know, I'm proud to see them succeed. That's amazing. You know. But unfortunately, somehow, yeah, a lot of people have that strange belief, being stuck in the past, and past being better than, you know, the present, and yeah, that's unfortunate.
Well, this is what we're talking about, the projection of light. So you can lose a soul fragment because of an amazing experience, the same way you can lose a soul fragment because of a negative experience. And that's why Buddha taught that all attachment could be a problem.
Right.
He wasn't saying don't love. He said the only antidote to suffering was basically compassion and love.
Right.
But attachment is a different thing. And that's how people get stuck in the past, because they have an amazing experience. You know, let's say they win a medal in the Olympics, or they build their first, you know, $1 million business or whatever. And then they think this is it. It doesn't get better than this. And then that's what gets created. You know, and they're attached to the past because they keep wanting to go back to that moment of glory. You know, they become scared of the future. They're like, it's all downhill from here, right?
I'm laughing, but I personally know people like that.
Yeah.
That's why I laughed.
I had one lady that came with a serious food addiction. I mean, serious addiction to ice cream. I mean, she had a whole freezer just dedicated to ice cream.
It's a thing.
It's a thing, right? I And I've been a fat girl, okay? I was fat my whole adolescence because I had thyroid issues. I'm not anymore, but I was. I had deep empathy. She had a whole freezer with big tubs of ice cream. Okay, she could not stop. And she'd been to loads of therapists, and they all were working on her negative experiences. But the problem was the only experience of love that she'd had with her father was him taking her to the beach for some ice cream.
Oh.
Right? He took her to the beach for some ice cream. And then he disappeared, never came back.
So that was her way of going back and bathing in the love of her father.
But whenever someone asked her what was the trauma, there wasn't one, because it wasn't a trauma.
Right.
You know, that it was the love that she thought she would never experience again, and that she didn't want anyone to replace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she didn't want anyone to take from her, and she didn't even want to admit that she had that. Right? But it wasn't a negative experience keeping her trapped. It was the loving experience of every time I ice cream, that's father's love, acceptance, connection.
Yeah.
You know? So attachment can be like that. I've met loads of people that had a relationship with someone amazing in the past, and now they won't move on. You know, they're like, oh, it's that person. You're like, you left a soul fragment there. You literally, you know, you're so attached to a past experience, you're refusing to move forward. And we project our light, and I'm not kidding. You know, being attached to past positive experiences is just as dangerous as being attached to past negative experiences, because you're no longer in the present moment, and when that happens, you're not in alignment. You know, and that's a recipe for uneasiness and distress and pain.
Right. Yeah, I thought of someone just now. who left not just a piece of fragment, it's a whole big glass way back when, but that's okay.
Yeah, and
They,
parents do it as well. Like mothers do it with children. The number of times I've had mothers tell me, I wish they were 4 years old again. I wish they were little again. And they've left a fragment with that baby. They left a moment of time, when they were there, feeling feeling that level of deep unconditional love while they were breastfeeding for the first time, or whilst the baby was walking for the first time, and they thought, I'm never going to be as happy as this. This is it. This is the happiest moment of my life. And then that gets left there, and they can't experience the joy of being an adult mother to adult children. They can't experience the joy of being a grandmother because they want to go back.
Mhm.
It's leaving the light is a very powerful thing.
Interesting. Which leads us to the whole time conversation. Because, like, what I was listening to, and I'll leave a link to everything I'm referencing to. I'll leave a link so people can watch. You guys can watch it, and it's incredible. It's also healing. But time is an illusion, but yet it's a very powerful law, right? And I don't even know where to start. So, like, to me, this whole concept of living multiple lives, we call them quote unquote past lives, we call them future lives, which is like a lot more interesting to me personally because I know a lot less about it. But the whole concept is very hard to grasp for certain people. Like I finally grasped it, and that came with the whole realization, which I referenced in the beginning of the interview. But what's interesting is when you were talking about meeting your future self. But maybe we should start a little dial back and talk about the laws of time.
So
A huge conversation, right?
it's a big conversation, and I did a talk on it because so many people were coming to me and they'd been told by other healers that you never had to go into the past, that you just had to stay in the present moment. And I was like, that's true, but there is nothing outside the present moment. There's no such thing as a past life or a future life. In truth, they're all happening now, and by healing them, you are healing the present moment. There's no separation. But if you're holding suffering on any level of your multidimensional spiritual being, then that's a problem. It's a block to Creator's love. It's a block to you going to the next level spiritually. But you can get caught up. You have a lot of people that get very caught up in their past lives and who they were, right? Or in their childhood experiences and what happened. So a lot of healers are scared of showing what happened in the past because some people use that as an excuse to go deeper into victim consciousness or deeper into narcissistic consciousness instead of actually transcending the pain. But when from a theta healing perspective, and this is just a metaphor, but we believe there are 7 planes of existence, and the 7th is like complete pure unconditional love, and the 6th is the laws of the universe, sound, resonance, color, sacred geometric shapes, and these basically, so the law of mathematics, the law of gravity, the law of time and space, they're all under other laws. And there are emotional laws and there are physical laws, the laws of physics. And if you get high enough into the higher laws, you can bend the lower laws, which is why when you're happy, time flies, and when you're sad, time slows down, because love bends the law of time and space, right? It's also why you can get a miraculous healing, because the healing's already happened. And once you go into the unconditional love, time and space is bent, so the healing can happen instantly, right? Healings always happen instantly. The moment you pray for a healing through the Creator of the universe, it's already happened. The problem can be with the time it takes to manifest, and that's to do with your beliefs about how quickly things can change. Right? And I had this, I've never said this to anyone, okay, but I love you and I trust you so much, I'll tell you the truth, right? It's embarrassing for me, so whoever's watching, I'm sorry, but it's the truth, right? And I'm being really honest. So when I first woke up, before I discovered that, I was 19, I was really young, and I had these really bad urine infections. And I would connect with the higher power and I'd say, it's commanded that this be healed. And it would disappear. And then 10 minutes later, it would come back. The day, like a yo-yo. I'd be like, go away. And it would go away. And then it would come back. because I'd understood that miracles were possible and that through Creator all things are possible. But I didn't believe it was possible to have a healing instantly. I believed that it took you a week or 2 weeks to heal an infection. That's what I'd been taught since I was a little child. You know, so I had dual beliefs, and that's something else we talk about in Theta, and it's a very important part of shadow work. So, like for example, I had a very but I had parts of my childhood that had a lot of emotional abuse, and I had parts of my childhood that were absolutely amazing, and especially at school, I performed incredibly well. So I had dual beliefs. I had very different beliefs about who I was professionally versus who I was privately.
Mhm.
And that manifested into completely different identities based on whether I was to do healing work at home or do healing work in the office, right? And even as to why I was acting like a crazy person. I was a completely different person at work than I was with my husband or with my family. And even my mom be like, what are you doing? How can you be this nice, you know, to other people and treat the people that you love so badly? And I would not understand why it was happening, but it's called a dual belief.
Mhm.
Right? Because when I was working from home, I had the belief that I was worthless, that I was, you know, nothing, that I couldn't do anything right, that there was something wrong with me. And when I was working at school, I had the belief that I was bright, that I was head of my class, that I was advanced, that I knew what I was doing. So I had very different beliefs operating based on the environment my genetics were exposed to. It was triggering completely different genetics, right? And some people call it, you know, multiple personality, but it's just multiple belief systems. You know, I
Right.
have two personalities. I had two different belief systems designed to survive in two very different environments as a child.
Mhm.
You know, so if you have a child that's raised partly at home by their parents, partly at school, partly by their grandparents, that child's going to have three very different identities and roles it has to assume in order to survive in those environments.
Right.
Right? If you have a child that's just raised by one primary carer, that child becomes a lot more solid because they know who that carer is and what they have to do to get the love, the attention, the approval that they need. But when the child has to be different people for different adults, they create different belief systems, right? So it's exactly what you're saying. It's like when it comes to healing time, you're often dealing with dual beliefs. You're dealing with the belief that you're an infinite being, and then you have on an ancestral level or a past life level beliefs that you're a human. You know, you're not, you're literally, you have to obey the gods. Life is fated. You don't, like destiny is something that's only for heroes in storybooks.
Mhm.
You know, it's like when you think I wanted to be free, but I had the belief I was a slave. You know, I wanted to be what's it called, respected, but I thought that I was a possession. There were dual beliefs that were coming in from other lives, you know, that were making me not understand what was going on.
Right.
um, but when you realize that time can be bent by love, that's when you start seeing your past parallel in future lives.
Mhm.
Sometimes so you can learn, like you said, with the future lives. I love going into my future and asking,
How do you
what
do that?
how do you do that?
Yes.
Well,
Because it's easy for you, you know, and some of us we have to learn.
it's super simple. You want to get into a trance state. Okay, you can use hypnosis, you can use meditation, but you want to be in a light alpha to a deep delta state. Now, I want to really stress this: the depth of trance does not matter. Okay, you can get a really good healing in a very light trance or in a very deep trance. The level of trance does not block the healing. What's important is that you go into a deep enough level of trance that your subconscious mind is open. Right? And then what I do is I go into that white light and I ask to be shown the future or to be taken to the part of me that's already figured this out, that's already solved this problem. And I'll ask them, what did you do? You know, what did you say? Who did you become to get over this?
Right.
There's a really, really famous businessman. There's a book called Tribe of Mentors by Timothy Ferriss. And one of these guys who's literally a multi-billionaire, he asks his future grandchildren what to do. You
Huh.
know, every decision he asks them, you know, what should I do? And he says they literally tell him, you know, if you make this decision, we won't exist.
Oh my God. This is a really good tool.
Yeah, it's super. We use it all the time. We use it all, future reading we use all the time. It's not just about seeing someone's future, it's about changing the future.
Right.
You know, because if you see something about it. If you don't see it, then you can't do something about it. I use it to change illnesses because I've got the gene for Alzheimer's and diabetes and obesity. And when I went into the future, I saw that I was really not well, and my angels made it clear, this is what you have to change dietary wise, this is what you have to change emotionally, this is what you have to do. So these things no longer manifest. So you choose a different destiny.
Right.
Your fate is the programs you're given by default. Destiny is when you decide to actually take responsibility and go in the direction of what's possible for you. So it's you're stepping into the infinite field of possibility instead of stepping into that field of problems. You're moving into possibility. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about the infinite possibility.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is so true, that when it's very, very useful. And I used to be, most people are terrified of seeing the future, like not a little terrified, like
It's awesome.
It's amazing, but I refused to do it for like 5 years.
I think there's, first of all, there's so many of them. There's like infinite possibilities of who I am tomorrow, even. And I guess when you do that, you ask for like the better version of you to come step in, right?
I ask for both.
Huh.
Because I need leverage.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what happens if I do make the decision, and I want to see what I lose if I don't.
Okay.
I always ask for both. It's the same thing with life. Like whenever I look at a life, I always ask, and I think this is from my lifetimes as a shaman, because all the research and reading I've done, this is how they do it. And I haven't seen another modality that does it this way. But literally, when in shamanism, you visit the birth and the death of a life. You don't just visit the birth. So a lot of past life regressions, they take you to a life where you were born and they ask you who you were and they leave it at that. But with shamanism, it's where were you born? Who were your parents? Who were your teachers? What were your gifts? What did you accomplish? Who was your family? Who were your children? And then how did you die?
Right.
And, that's, for me, that was very, very powerful because it started to dissolve my fear of death. And made me realize exactly what you're saying, that for me, seeing so many of my past lives, because my spiritual teacher, he was, we're not in contact anymore, but he was really gifted. He's still one of the most gifted healers I've ever met. And he would say to me, because I would get these flashes, like after that first life, every night for almost 6 months after that, I was dreaming of a different lifetime. And it was really tiring. And I was trying to keep up with law school and my health wasn't too good at that point. And I was like to him, I don't know how to make it stop. And he just kept saying, you don't make it stop. You just don't attach. He's like, it will stop when it's ready to stop. And I was like, I don't understand. It's really, really hard not to get attached to all these people, all these places. How am I supposed to just let this happen and not get involved? Is it a wasted opportunity? What is actually going on? And he literally said, Buddha experienced this when he had a spiritual awakening. Jesus experienced this when he had a spiritual awakening. Moses experienced this when they had a spiritual awakening. He said, do not get attached. He's like, it's brain candy. You're remembering everything that happened so you can release it. It's like Creator or God can get through all these lifetimes way faster than you could. It's like, do not interfere. You're subconsciously releasing all of this stuff, really quickly because you need to. If it was supposed to be slow, it would be. But it's what you're saying, like remembering past lives is very useful as well because it gives you perspective. Like there were so many things, including finances, that I'd been refusing to work on for literally thousands of lives. And every lifetime I'd say, no, I'll do it next life, or this is not me. I was so identified with not being a money person that it just wasn't my identity. And I kept refusing. Nope, doesn't matter. I'll leave it to other people. And it was literally witnessing the level of suffering that poverty had caused over and over and over again that made me go, it's not happening in another life. It stops here. This is game over. I'm done. I will do whatever it takes to learn how to actually express abundance as an act of love. It's the same thing with health or illness. When it's the first time you've gotten, diabetes or Alzheimer's or obesity, it's fine. But when it's the 10th or 15th life, you start to realize it's like we said about the tree earlier, this is becoming entrenched. And it's also getting passed forward. You're then giving it to your kids, you're giving it to your partner, you're making it the problem of your community. Because when it's like what I said about, depression on a level being selfish, You know, when you're depressed, you're in pain, and all you can feel is that pain. But what your partner watching you suffer is one of the worst forms of torture imaginable. You know,
That's
and right, and watching you suffer, not being able to do anything to help you. You know, the CIA use these tactics. You know, that they're that hard on the soul. You know, so when you realize that your ego cannot hurt you without hurting other people, that there is nothing that just hurts you.
mhm.
You know, that when you're depressed, anxious, ill, it's actually hurting everyone around you too. It changes your perspective, and suddenly you take action faster. Because when
Right.
you see life, you see it from your perspective. When you review a life, whether it's past or future, you see it from your perspective and you see it from other people's perspective. And the distance, the detachment shows you the consequences of what actually happened. You know, so for me, lifetimes are a way of learning and growing a lot faster. And so, like the past or the future, I literally step in, and I don't just talk about distant future. I will step into a meeting that's happening next week. I'm starting to teach an intuitive anatomy class on Friday. I've already stepped into that future 6 times and changed that future many times over so I can be the best that I can be when I show up, right? I'm like, the last time I lived this life, what did I do? How did it go? What can I do better?
Did you ask to see the worst?
Yeah. Yeah, because this is what you're saying about polarity. I refuse to spiritually bypass, and the worst has gifts for me too,
Right.
right?
It's
And if I only look at the good stuff, I refuse to take the gifts from the negative experience, and I miss out. You
right.
know, like the good or bad is our perspective, not the truth.
Mhm.
Very often, when I look at the negative experiences, there's profound lessons. I remember when I woke up spiritually, this is like was very surreal for me. But I remember coming home, and I wasn't on good terms with my parents at that point. And I went home, and I lived my whole life believing that they didn't really love me. And when I came back after waking, they loved me so much. It was so obvious. And they'd loved me since before I was born. They'd even loved me enough to do things that would teach me, you know, lessons that were too hard for other souls to take on because they couldn't handle me not liking them or hating them and you know, that level of mercy and compassion and understanding was a different thing. It makes it very hard for me to be angry with people. Now, sometimes people say to me that I'm if I have to choose like a shadow side, I'm definitely a codependent, you know. And people say, why can't you get angry? Why isn't that going on? I'm like, I can get angry. It's just very hard to get angry when I know that this is for my highest good. You know, when I know that every negative thing is also a really big gift, and it's not like it's like you said about God, it's not just a knowledge, it's an experience. Like I know that if I go into victim mode, I'm just not seeing the truth
Mhm.
of what's really going on. So if I get angry, it tends to be with me, you know, for not having learned something deeply enough sooner. Like, you know, all the narcissists in my life, they taught me how to love myself. You know, they taught me how to really believe in my ideas and believe in my dreams. They taught me that I mattered and that I was important, and that sometimes, even when other people don't like it, I had to put myself first.
Right.
You know, they taught me to do what was true to my heart instead of what was for approval. And I didn't learn it easily because I was very stubborn. But a lot of the people who behave like narcissists, the moment I mastered those lessons, they were different people because a different part of them was being called forward. You know, we were ready to move on to the next lesson. But when I was refusing, when I was constantly playing small, they were having none of it. You know, it was like, you know, we're not going anywhere till you learn this. And it's like we said, the lessons repeat, not just in this lifetime, but in others until you grab the opportunity.
Right. It's interesting because I did notice that certain people, especially when you're in a relationship, they just constantly bring certain side of you, you know, that sometimes you like that side of you, sometimes you don't, sometimes you just get tired of being just that, you know. But because most of, like, meeting the one is a very rare thing, but being in relationships is a very very natural thing, and being there for a reason, because certain side of you is being brought forward that you're supposed to be working on,
Yeah.
or yeah, it's very interesting.
I think with relationships in particular, we normally look at what happened to us, but we normally don't look at our relationship with other people. We look at our side, but a relationship is two sides.
Of course.
It's not just one. And most people, even when they're doing a healing, they will allow, like, for example, they will say, visualize yourself talking to your mother. And you say what you need to say, but they never let her talk back. Right? It's not a two-way street. And then the healing, like you're saying, is not complete. And it's the same thing in relationships. We see it from our perspective, but unless you're willing to actually give the other person's opinion significance and strength and love, then you end up going into the same places over and over again, because we live with who we think they are, but they live with who we really are.
How is that? Don't they live with who they think we are?
Nope. They actually experience physically how we behave, the things we say, the things we think, and we have the luxury of making up only the good bits that we think about ourselves in our head. We have, most humans have a story that they're a really good person and that they have some flaws, but that they're mostly really good.
Yes.
And right, that's the common denominator amongst humans.
Sure.
But the truth is that when you're living in close proximity with another person, especially if you have very big blocks to love, it hurts the other person as much as it hurts you. And you're saying, well, I don't want to work on this right now, and it's my thing, and I'll decide when I work on it. But when you're in such close proximity and your thing is affecting their energy, their karma, their space, the law of grace comes in and kind of bends the law of karma and gives you the opportunity to kind of clear it faster, because it's causing a problem in someone else's life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like if you're the owner of a company and everyone in that company prays for you to reach another level of enlightenment because your narcissism is causing them suffering. Normally that person will then have a spiritual awakening, because so many people are being influenced by them and their lives are being hurt because that person hasn't evolved a certain amount yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing in intimate relationships. Our behavior directly affects the other person. And I'll give you an example from me and my husband. So one time we were driving back from Scotland, because my parents live in Scotland, and we'd gone to visit. And my husband was still learning more of the psychological vocabulary, because he had very strong spiritual vocabulary, but he hadn't really studied the emotional healing side. And we were discovering, like, Brené Brown and Marianne Williams and all that stuff in the audiobooks when we were driving in the car. And we were having a fight. And I said to him, you're always so angry at me. Why are you so angry at me? It's not fair, that you take out your anger on me. And he looked at me and he said, you're doing something. He's like, I don't know what you're doing. I can't put a name on it. I don't have the fancy words that you have, but you are doing something and it hurts. And when it hurts, I get angry. And the fact that I express my pain as anger is no different than you expressing your pain with sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally remember, like, I drove until the next stop and I stopped the car and I said, something, I don't know what I'm doing either, but I'm going to trust you that I'm doing something that hurts. And we're just going to ask. We're going to ask that it be, revealed to us, that we have a revelation, what it is that I'm doing. And then it was the next day that it came to me that I wasn't being honest. It wasn't conscious, but when he was asking me if something had upset me or if somebody had hurt me, I was lying. I was saying I was okay when I wasn't okay.
You were trying to protect him, of course, emotionally, but this never really works.
Yeah, and he was getting angry at me for lying and being dishonest, and he wasn't able to verbalize it, but he knew something was off. He knew I was doing something that was damaging the relationship, right? But if I'd gone into, you're just a crazy angry person,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not doing anything wrong, and this is all you projecting your stuff onto me, I would never have seen what was really happening. I had to trust him enough to be able to go there. And it's really hard when you're in the middle of an argument, or really hard when you're not sure if that person has your best interests at heart. But that's the real issue, is that you pull out of the person what it is that you're expecting from them. if you're in the car sitting next to somebody who thinks that you are manipulative or a liar or, an angry, crazy person, even if those thoughts aren't verbalized out loud, they're creating a toxic, emotional, energetic atmosphere that doesn't create a safe space for self-expression or trust, right? So we think we can have these thoughts, and because we're not saying them out loud, then they just weren't there. But all thought creates form on some level, right? And the other person feels it. The same way if someone's sitting in the car, like when you go on that first date and the person's thinking you're amazing and you're thinking they're amazing, and it's like you're walking on air,
Never
because you're,
anymore.
it will soon. But when
No,
that
just I'm
happens,
so
right?
constantly, I'm so present. I've taught myself to be very, very present all the time. And very, yeah, I don't know. So it's just, it's not that I'm, not falling in love or anything like that. It's just even when that happens, even with my own kids who I love, far and beyond anything, it's the same thing. I don't know. I don't really walk on air anymore, sort of say.
Well, that's a whole different set of beliefs, and we probably have to do like a session on mother issues.
Oh, okay.
But one of the biggest blocks to love is loving your children more than anything else,
Huh.
because your partner wants to be number one in your life, right? And if that space is already taken, then they're not even going to try
No, I never said that love. I love, well, I certainly love my kids
anything.
more than anything, but I have my life and they know that.
Yeah, it's not about them. It's about your partner.
Right.
And it's all you've done constellations. It's about positions.
Mhm.
You have space for many people in your heart. There doesn't have to be like a less of a loving of your children. There just has to be a more of a loving of the man. But I think it's not easy because I think kids bring out this level of love that we mostly never experience with anyone else.
Right.
you know so when you actually realize that you could love another person to that level, um and you haven't loved them that much, I think it's why it's an initiation of sorts. It's
Maybe.
also a deeper awakening.
Conversation, yes.
But yeah, and the mother and the father thing, it's a very, I have to deal with it in my practice thing a lot, because it's actually the most common time that couples divorce is after having kids. um, and it's about jealousy to do with the children, and jealousy to do with the partner, um, and we're not allowed to be jealous of our kids. We're not allowed to express our shadow in parenting. It's still very, I haven't seen one shadow parenting course, not one.
That's a very good point.
There's not one. And like, it's one of the most important experiences, a shadow. They're like relationship shadow work, and you conveniently miss out your children. I'm like, what? There's there's something going on there. There's spiritual bypassing, right? Um, but I think people really still get very triggered when you suggest that, um, maybe they should change how they love children, or change how they love their partner, or it's what I was saying about the radical truth. I had a lady in my office last week with her partner, and she was really angry that he was spoiling their daughter. But she completely stopped loving this man. I mean, completely. And her daughter was then taking the position, of giving him the most love inside the family. And I was sitting there going, okay, if you want this behavior to stop with your daughter, you have to change your behavior with your husband. When the moment you start giving him love, she'll go back into her old and proper space.
Yeah, sometimes children take on that responsibility onto themselves when, you know, they feel that one of the two, the parents is not doing that.
And parents often, like, they don't admit it. It's like when I was depressed and I was saying, oh, it's fine, and it's like, actually you're not giving any love at all. It's the same thing. It's like, I'm a really loving parent. It's like, yes, you love your child, but that doesn't mean you're expressing it. It doesn't mean you're sharing it. It doesn't mean you're showing it.
Mhm.
um and they say, I want my kids to be happy, and I'm like, are you happy? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, let's start there. As your happiness grows, their happiness will grow. Would you be, as a child, you love your mother more than anything. She's like the heartbeat of the family. If she's sad, if she's depressed, If she is not in love with your father, then you're going to be sad, you're going to be depressed, and you're not going to like your father. You know, you'll absorb her feelings and not even understand where it came from. So the family stuff is, family shadow work is a very important side. And we've kind of done a bit of like, there's family constellations and there's ancestral work, but there should be parental shadow work. There really should.
Well, finally, Skylar, would you tell our listeners, viewers, um, what is your spiritual routine? Like just a routine thing during a day. Maybe that would be like a good, because everyone has gifts. Everyone can awaken if they want to, right? And everyone will eventually build. I have my own routine, right? Everyone will build their own routine, but I think it's very, very practical to kind of share with people what your routine is, so they can take a look at that, maybe take a look at another teacher's routine, and kind of like form their own.
Yeah, for me, I keep it super simple. I have my Course in Miracles meditation, and then I have a stillness meditation practice, like complete silence and breath work, for an hour. And it's just basically a mix of prayer and meditation. Because for me, prayer is when I ask, the universe or creator, but meditation is when I listen and it's when I receive the answers. The prayer I use is mostly the prayer in the Course in Miracles. It's, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? And the reason I use a prayer that's so surrendered is because I recognize that of my conscious mind, I often don't know what would make me happy. I often have delusions of what would actually bring me peace. So when I surrender or join my mind with a higher mind, that day then becomes, dedicated to the glory and greatness of what's actually possible, right? And in meditation, you have to quiet your intellect. So if you think of your energy as actually in momentum, your aura is constantly moving, your mind is constantly moving. The way your blood is constantly moving around your body, your energy and your electromagnetic field are constantly moving around you. And the same way that if it's a windy day and I throw a ball at you, that ball might not land near you because it gets moved by the momentum. It's the same thing when you're in a very high or very low energy that's moving very fast, and your guides or creators trying to send something to you, but it's getting moved because of the speed at which this energy that's surrounding you is going. It's like it can't get through your energy. How many times have you actually said to somebody, I can't get through to you? You know you can't, you just don't understand why. It's like, why can't I get through to you? And it's because their energy is literally moving in a way that's distorting the message you're sending. Right? So when you meditate, that energy field slows down and it allows the messages to penetrate. It's kind of like you've had your smartphone on airplane mode, and when you meditate, you switch it on to connection mode, and suddenly all the messages that the universe has been trying to give you and creators trying to give you come in like bing, 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 bing. It's like exactly your instructions, your curriculum for the day is downloaded.
Right.
So for me, I will wake up, I will do my Course in Miracles meditation, which is like a sentence for 5 or 10 minutes. Then I will go into my stillness meditation, and I will literally do breath work. I literally do the what's it called, breathing in through my nose all the way down to my abdomen, along my spine, and then all the way back out. And I do that for an hour. And then I will, move into my prayer, so that I know what to do for the day. But I keep it really simple because otherwise I find I don't do it. And I think everybody does have their own routine. What's important is that they do it, and that they have a space where they're actually able to listen to the universe. It's not like the universe is not your delivery boy or your servant. It's like I said about the relationship. You have to make space to ask, but you have to make space to listen. And you do get requests. I'm not kidding. You will. Like yesterday, I went where I went. My hairdresser, for example, where I went to get my hair done. I would never have gone in there. That was divine guidance. I literally got told, go into that space. There's a person that needs help, with financially, and she's going to give you really, she's actually literally, it's exactly what you want in exchange, but this person needs you, and sometimes I'll be walking past a shop and they'll say, this person's having trouble paying the rent. Do you mind going in there and buying something? And you will get guided. One time I was in, up in Scotland, and there was a little fish and chip shop, and I didn't know anybody in there, and I got guided to go in and speak to the cashier lady and to give her an angel reading. And I was like, they haven't asked for it. I don't want to do it. And angels sing, and they just kept singing louder and louder until I did it. It was like you're a kid and they keep turning up the volume and you're like, can't hear you. But anyway, I went into the shop and I waited until the last minute because I was so scared that they were going to reject me or, think I was rude or something. But literally, I got up to this lady and I literally said to her, I do angel readings, and it's okay if you think this is completely crazy, but they've told me to tell you, that your daughter is going to be okay, that her prayers are going to be answered in 2 months, and that she doesn't have to worry, that, Archangel Michael's with her and is protecting her, and that literally her injury isn't going to happen again. Like her health problem is over. And the lady behind the counter just started crying, and she said, my daughter has been trying to get pregnant for years, and she did her first angel Reiki course last week, and she wasn't sure if it was really working, but they found out she's pregnant, and the last baby they had to get rid of because it's disabled.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes you get told where to go and what to do, and it takes real courage to do it in a loving way, and also to deal with the rejection if the person isn't ready at the time.
What I found really interesting, because a little secret, Skylar and I tried to record this interview last week. It didn't work out. There was an error message, so we're doing it again. But when we talked, you shared with me the way that you pray. You basically have a dialogue with God, with consciousness, whatever you call it, and you just deeply honest, just the way it is. If you're angry, express it. If you're grateful, you express it, etc., etc. It was interesting because I tried that.
How did it go?
I started laughing because I don't know how it went, but I was just laughing at myself because I was basically judging myself as it went. You know what I'm saying? Am I asking too much? Am I being, you know what I mean? And then I step back and I'm starting laughing because I'm all of a sudden split into these two individuals, one spraying and the other is watching and laughing and judging. You know what I'm saying? And then the third one is laughing at the whole thing. But practice.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like, we're used to putting on faces, even for God.
Yeah.
Right. And most people, when they pray, they whether it's someone else's prayer, or whether it's like, I don't need your help, please help this other person, they need it more than me. We avoid the intimacy, but prayer is a two-way street, and Creator knows exactly what's going on inside you anyway. He knows exactly what's happening. The problem is you are under the illusion that the Creator doesn't. It's exactly what you're saying. There's a part of you that's laughing at you praying as if Creator doesn't already know. Exactly the thoughts, exactly the pain. Like you said, it's within all of us, right? It's living every moment, living every breath. It's in every aspect that you split into.
Right.
It was there. It witnessed the whole thing. So when you're talking about praying, authentic, communication is the root of your power.
Right.
Vulnerability is the birthplace of your spiritual and emotional power. And being vulnerable and honest with God is the only way that you can allow Him to change your will and your heart in a way that's authentic and real, and also gives you compassion. It's like what I was saying about spiritual bypassing. If you're honest with God, you then understand other people feeling the way that they feel. There's this gap between who we are and who we want to be. And most of us are pretending it doesn't exist, but we all know it does. Right?
Yeah. It's interesting because it's like so many things that I'd like to talk about, but there's a law of time, right? But here's the thing is that God is I and I am God, right? So, and the God is a conscious anyway, it's far beyond, because you're just an aspect of that consciousness. So it kind of like this conversation with God is sort of like the free will too. Like, oh, if I am yielding to the flow of life, the flow of God, am I like betraying my free will? No, you're not, because you also are God, and you're the one who is creating this anyway. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of aspect of things that makes me so happy. You know?
People often say, if I give God control over my life, then will He ask me to become a lawyer or an accountant or a martyr? And I'm sitting there going, well, if those aren't your gifts, then no, because God's at least as intelligent as you are.
Yeah.
So unless that's your gift, why, if there are millions of people on the planet that are good at this already, why would He ask you to do it?
Right.
It's like you have to give God a little bit of credit here. It's a very intelligent consciousness. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's so right. You're so spot on that you know that relationship, when you really see it, like when you surrender your will to divine will, you're surrendering to a higher part of you. And
Exactly.
and you're also realizing that you're actually taking control, not losing control, because the
Exactly.
force that's in charge of the universe is at least as intelligent as you are. I'm willing to bet a lot more intelligent than you.
Or if you're just an aspect of it.
Exactly. It's like you wouldn't let your liver run your whole body. Even your brain doesn't get to run your body. It's your consciousness that runs your body. And people say to me, like, oh, I can hand over my relationships, but I can't hand over my finances. I'm like, seriously, hand them over yesterday. It's like, in Alcoholics Anonymous, when they say your best thinking got you here,
Mm.
you know, you need to join your mind with a higher mind to solve the problem. The level of thinking that created the problem is not the level of thinking that solves the problem. And without prayer, you're stuck in that same level of thinking.
Mm.
When you pray and when you meditate, you shift to a different level of thinking. But first, you have to witness the thinking that's actually going on. You have to be honest about what's really there and enjoy it, enjoy the process. And it makes it so much easier to be there for other people when they're going through their stuff. Especially as a spiritual teacher, as a healer, my students, a lot of them are there because I've solved the problems that they're facing. And because I've learned to have compassion for myself and be radically honest, they think I'm like the most psychic person in the universe because I'm reading them. I'm like, you feel like this, and this. And they're like, yes. And they're like, how do you know that? And you're sitting there going, because you're like me 4 years ago, like you're identical, you know, because they're a
Mm.
vibrational match. They've seen that part. So on a subconscious level, they know I've healed that wound, and they've been placed in that space so they could heal it too.
Right.
Right? So it's exactly what you're saying. It's like when you surrender to Creator, you become more of who you really are. You get more powerful, you get more control.
Mm.
And you move into a space of peace instead of space of continual war between your fear mind and your loving mind. And you realize that no matter what challenge you're facing, the loving perspective is the right response.
Mm.
I just think that, like, in the past, people are like, oh yeah, but the Indians got massacred, and they were really loving. All the nice people on the planet get trampled over. It's like because they were learning that sometimes no is the most loving response.
Right.
They said yes to things they should never have said yes to. They tolerated things that they should never have tolerated. you know
100%.
they were learning, like, the law of grace, which is literally being allowed to defend yourself, being allowed to block another person harming your free will. They were learning there's nothing loving about sacrifice. It's not a superficial thing, because we go into yes, yes, yes mode. Everything is fine. I love you, so you do whatever you want, as opposed to I love you, so I'm going to be as honest with you in the kindest way possible. But I will not lie to you. Still say that to my husband. He's like, why did you have to say that? And I'm like, why can't you just be happy? And I'm like, because I will not lie to you. It's like, I know when I start, I'll never stop. So I'm not starting. It's just not happening. It's like, it's the same policy with God. Just make a commitment not to lie. Just be who you are. And then who you are will naturally open like that flower.
Right.
But don't come pretending to be somewhere else. It's like being in Edinburgh and asking for a map to London when you're really in Aberdeen and asking for a map to London. The directions are completely different. So just be honest about where you are, and then you'll get an accurate map of how to get where you want to go.
Well, thank you so much, Skylar. You're as usual wonderful and beautiful and so kind.
I love you very much.
I love you so much.
You.
I don't know how I deserve this gift, but I'm really, really, really treasuring this one.
I love you too very much, and I'm so grateful you had me on here.
So we'll continue. I'm sure we'll shoot more of these. Well, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, guys. Bye.